The night was silent, except for the soft rustling of leaves in the cold breeze. Jack had been camping alone in the dense forest, miles away from civilization. He enjoyed the solitude, the peace of nature, and the escape from his daily routine. The fire crackled beside him, casting flickering shadows on the tall trees around. He took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp night air, and looked up at the sky. The stars shone brightly, undisturbed by city lights. Jack had always been fascinated by space, by the idea that there could be something, or someone, beyond Earth. He often imagined what it would be like to meet an alien, but it was just a silly thought, a childhood fantasy. But that night, something changed. A sudden noise broke the silence. A sharp, metallic clanking sound, followed by a low, painful moan. Jack froze, his heart pounding. He grabbed his flashlight and stood up, scanning the darkness beyond his campfire. Another clank, then another. It sounded like metal scraping against metal, like someone struggling with chains. Jack hesitated. He was deep in the forest, far from any roads or houses. Who else could be out here? Curiosity got the better of him. He picked up his knife, just in case, and started walking toward the sound. His boots crunched softly against the fallen leaves as he moved cautiously through the trees. The sound grew louder. His pulse quickened. Then he saw it. A figure was crouched near a tree, bound in thick, silver chains. The flashlight beam illuminated her. Jack gasped. It was a woman, but not like any woman he had ever seen. Her skin shimmered faintly under the moonlight, a soft, silvery blue hue. Her eyes glowed, an eerie but mesmerizing shade of violet. Her hair, long and flowing, looked almost weightless, like strands of liquid metal. She was dressed in a torn metallic suit that barely covered her slender body. She looked weak, exhausted. The chains around her wrists and ankles seemed too tight, cutting into her strange, glowing skin. She struggled, but it was clear she had no energy left. Jack's mind raced. Was she real? Or was he dreaming? The woman lifted her head slowly, her glowing eyes locking onto his. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she spoke. "Help. Me?" Her voice was soft but desperate. It didn't sound human. It had an echo, like two voices speaking at once. Jack's grip tightened on his knife. Was this some kind of trap? A prank? His instincts told him to run, but his heart told him otherwise. She was suffering. She needed help. He took a cautious step forward. "Who did this to you?" he asked. The woman flinched, as if the question hurt her. She looked around, fear flashing in her glowing eyes. Then she whispered, "They are coming." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. Before he could ask anything else, she winced in pain and pulled weakly at the chains. Jack could see strange symbols engraved on the metal. The chains weren't ordinary. They pulsed with a faint, bluish glow. He kneeled beside her, inspecting the chains. "I don't know who you are, but if you're in danger, I'll help you." He pulled out his knife and tried to wedge it between the chains, but the metal didn't even scratch. He frowned. "What is this made of?" The woman shook her head. "Hurry, before they find me." Jack glanced around. The forest was still, but an uneasy feeling settled in his chest. He didn't know who they were, but the urgency in her voice made his hands tremble. He searched his bag and pulled out a small hatchet. He raised it and struck the chains with all his strength. A flash of blue light erupted from the impact, sending a strange vibration through the air. The force knocked Jack backward. His vision blurred for a second, and his ears rang. When he regained focus, he saw the chains begin to crack. The woman gasped as the glowing symbols flickered and faded. Jack stood up, gripping the hatchet tighter. He swung again. The chains shattered. The woman collapsed, breathing heavily, her body trembling. Jack reached out, steadying her. Her skin was cold, unnaturally cold. "Thank you," she whispered, looking up at him. For the first time, he saw something else in her glowing eyes. Relief, gratitude, and fear. Before Jack could say anything, the night was broken by a deafening roar. It was not human. A bright blue light flashed in the distance. The ground trembled slightly, and a chilling wind rushed through the trees. The woman's eyes widened. They are here. Jack turned toward the light, his heart racing. He had no idea what he had just done. Jack's breath came in sharp, shallow gasps as he turned toward the strange, pulsating blue light in the distance. The sound that followed wasn't just a noise. It was a presence, a force that made the ground tremble beneath his feet. The woman beside him clutched his arm, her grip surprisingly strong for someone who had just been freed from chains. "Run," she whispered. Jack hesitated. He had questions, too many. Who was she? Who were they? Why had she been chained in the middle of the forest? But the urgency in her voice left no room for hesitation. A shadow moved through the trees, tall and unnatural. Jack's instincts screamed at him. They weren't alone anymore. The woman suddenly pulled him, her silvery blue skin glowing faintly in the darkness. "We must go," she said, her voice layered with that strange, echoing tone. Jack followed her, his heart pounding. They ran through the thick forest, branches whipping past them. Jack wasn't even sure where they were going, only that they had to get away from whatever was behind them. The roar came again, closer this time. Jack risked a glance over his shoulder and nearly stumbled. Something was hunting them. It wasn't human. The figure moved with unnatural speed, its form shifting in the darkness. Jack couldn't make out its face, but he saw the glow, two piercing red eyes burning through the night. The creature's long, clawed arms swung as it sprinted, and its presence sent a chilling pressure through the air, making it harder to breathe. Jack's legs burned, but the woman kept moving effortlessly, guiding him through the trees. Then, just as he felt his strength fading, she suddenly stopped. Jack nearly crashed into her. "Why did you?" She raised a hand, silencing him. Her glowing violet eyes were locked onto something ahead. Jack followed her gaze and saw it. A shimmering, translucent wall of energy, stretching across the forest like an invisible barrier. The air crackled around it, a low hum vibrating through the ground. "What is that?" Jack panted. "The veil," she murmured. The red-eyed creature let out another unearthly growl, closing the distance fast. The woman turned to Jack. "Step through." "What?" "No way." Before he could finish, she grabbed his hand and pulled him forward. The moment they crossed the veil, the world shifted. Jack's vision blurred, his stomach twisted, and for a brief second, everything around him felt wrong, like stepping into a dream. Then, with a sharp jolt, reality snapped back into place. Jack stumbled forward onto solid ground. He blinked, adjusting to his surroundings. Everything was different. The dark forest was gone. Instead, they stood in an open landscape beneath a sky that was not Earth's. The stars above were unfamiliar, swirling in strange patterns. Two massive moons hung in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. The trees around them weren't trees at all. They were towering structures of glowing crystal, humming softly in the still air. Jack turned in shock. "Where?" The woman placed a hand on his shoulder. "You are safe. For now." Jack swallowed hard. His body still tingled from whatever had just happened. He turned back toward the veil. The translucent wall shimmered, and beyond it, he could still see the dark forest, the world he had just left behind. Then the red-eyed creature appeared. It skidded to a stop, its clawed hands pressing against the barrier. Its face was still shadowed, but Jack could see its mouth now. Razor-sharp teeth bared in a furious snarl. The woman let out a slow breath. "It cannot follow us." Jack exhaled, his entire body shaking. He stared at the strange creature, then back at the woman. "Okay. No more running. No more cryptic answers. Tell me everything." The woman looked at him, her glowing eyes filled with something unreadable. Then, at last, she spoke. "My name is Aaron, And you just saved someone who never should have existed on Earth. Jack's heart still pounded in his chest as he stared at Aaron, his mind racing with questions. The alien landscape around him was unlike anything he had ever seen. The air felt lighter, almost charged with energy, and the strange crystal trees cast shifting patterns of light across the ground. The silence was deep, almost unnatural, except for the soft hum that seemed to come from the world itself. He took a shaky breath. "Okay, Aaron," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Start from the beginning. What is this place? Who were you running from? And what the hell just happened?" Aaron turned her gaze to the shimmering veil behind them, where the red-eyed creature still lingered, pressing against the barrier with a low, guttural snarl. "You were not supposed to see any of this," she murmured. "No human was." Jack folded his arms. "Well, I did, and I'm not going anywhere until I get some answers." Aaron studied him for a long moment, then let out a soft sigh. "Very well." She gestured to a nearby outcrop of smooth, dark stone. "We should not linger near the veil. Come." Jack hesitated, but followed. As they walked, the ground beneath them seemed to pulse with a faint glow, reacting to their steps. The air smelled different too, crisp and electric, like the air before a storm. Finally, Aaron stopped and turned to face him. "You saved me back there," she said, "but you do not understand what you have done." Jack narrowed his eyes. "Then explain it to me." Aaron hesitated, as if weighing her words. "I am not from your world, but I was stranded there, captured." Her expression darkened. "I was not alone." Jack frowned. "Captured? By who?" She looked away. "Your kind." Jack blinked. "Wait, humans. Humans captured you?" "Yes." Aaron's voice was tight. "They found me when I crashed on your planet. I was studied, contained. They feared me, but they also wanted something from me." She glanced down at her own hands, flexing her fingers. "Something I could not give." Jack felt a shiver run down his spine. "And the thing chasing us, that wasn't human." Aaron's expression hardened. "No, that was something much worse." Jack swallowed. He thought back to the way the creature had moved, the unnatural way it had hunted them through the forest. "What is it?" Aaron's glowing violet eyes met his. "A collector." Jack felt a chill. "Collector of what?" Aaron hesitated. "Life." Jack exhaled sharply. "So it wasn't after me. It was after you." Aaron nodded. "It was sent to retrieve me, to drag me back." Jack rubbed his face. "And now I'm stuck in the middle of this." Aaron was quiet for a moment. Then she stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "You were not meant to be part of this," she said softly. "But you helped me. You risked yourself for a stranger. And now..." Jack felt the air shift around them, as if the world itself was waiting for what she would say next. "Now I must protect you." Jack's breath caught. "Protect me? From what?" Aaron glanced at the veil, where the collector still waited. "From them." Jack ran a hand through his hair. This was insane. A few hours ago, he was just another guy driving home after a long day. Now he was on another planet, being told he needed protection from some kind of intergalactic hunter. He exhaled. "Okay," he said slowly. "Then tell me, how do we stop it?" Aaron's lips pressed together. "We don't." Jack clenched his jaw. "That's not an option." Aaron studied him again, something unreadable in her expression. Then she turned, lifting a hand toward the sky. A soft glow began to form at her fingertips, swirling like liquid light. The energy pulsed, growing brighter until it shot upward, disappearing into the alien sky. Jack took a step back. "What are you doing?" Aaron lowered her hand, calling for help. Jack wasn't sure whether to feel relieved or even more terrified. Because if she needed help, then whatever was coming next was even worse than he had imagined. A deep vibration pulsed through the air as Aaron's signal disappeared into the alien sky. Jack felt the strange energy tingle against his skin, making the hair on his arms stand up. He didn't know what kind of help she had just called for, but he had a sinking feeling that things were about to get even crazier. Erin stood still, her gaze locked onto the swirling stars above. Jack could see the tension in her posture, the way her shoulders tightened like she was bracing for something. "How long until they get here?" Jack asked, shifting uncomfortably. Erin exhaled. "Not long. If they receive my call, they will come." Jack frowned. "If you're not sure." She turned to him, her glowing violet eyes unreadable. "I have been gone for a long time. I do not know if they will still answer." Jack ran a hand through his hair. "Great. So we just wait here and hope they show up before that thing finds a way through." Erin didn't respond. Instead, she looked back at the shimmering veil, her expression dark. Jack followed her gaze, and his stomach twisted. The collector was still there. It hadn't left. It hadn't even moved. It just watched. Jack shuddered. He had faced danger before. Natural disasters, near-car accidents, even the occasional fight. But this was different. This wasn't just some wild animal or a desperate criminal. This was something wrong, something that didn't belong in any world he understood. Erin suddenly tensed. "We need to move." Jack tore his eyes away from the creature. "Where?" "Somewhere safer." She took off without another word, and Jack had no choice but to follow. They weaved through the strange landscape, past glowing crystal formations and massive rock structures that seemed to hum with energy. The terrain was alien, yet oddly familiar, like something out of a dream he couldn't quite remember. After what felt like an hour, Erin finally slowed. They had reached a series of jagged cliffs overlooking a vast valley. At the bottom, Jack could see strange, pulsing lights flickering like fireflies. Erin motioned for him to stay low as they crouched behind a rocky outcrop. "This is a good place to wait," she murmured. Jack glanced at the valley below. "And what exactly are we waiting for?" Erin's gaze flickered toward the sky. "A sign." Jack sighed. "You're really into cryptic answers, aren't you?" She didn't smile. Before Jack could press further, something changed in the air. A sharp electric pressure filled the space around them, making his skin tingle. The ground trembled beneath his feet. Then the sky split open. Jack's breath caught as a streak of blinding light tore through the heavens, illuminating the entire valley in a burst of brilliant blue. The light didn't behave like lightning. It moved with purpose, spiraling downward like a living thing. Erin stood, her eyes wide with recognition. They came. Jack shielded his eyes as the light touched down at the center of the valley. The moment it hit, the world shuddered. The ground pulsed, sending out a wave of energy that made Jack stumble. When he looked up again, he saw them. Figures. Tall. Luminous. Powerful. They weren't like Erin. They were something more. Their bodies seemed to be made of living light, shifting between solid and translucent. Their eyes glowed like twin suns, filled with an intelligence that made Jack's chest tighten. Erin took a deep breath, then stepped forward. Jack grabbed her arm. "Wait, are they friendly?" Erin gave him a strange look. "They are my people." Jack hesitated, then released his grip. Erin walked forward, her posture tense but determined. The glowing figures turned toward her as she approached, their gazes unreadable. Then one of them, the tallest, spoke. "You have returned." The voice wasn't spoken in words, yet Jack heard it clear as day. It resonated in his mind, sending a shiver down his spine. Erin inclined her head. "I had no choice." The figure's gaze shifted to Jack. The moment it looked at him, Jack felt something inside him tremble, like his very soul was being examined. "And you have brought an outsider." Jack swallowed hard. Hi." The figure didn't react. It turned back to Erin. "You should not have come." Erin's expression hardened. "I had no choice. The collectors found me." A heavy silence followed. Then, Another voice spoke. Then it is already too late. Jack's pulse spiked. Too late for what? The tallest figure turned back to him. For you. The word sent a chill through Jack's bones. He glanced at Erin, but she was already stepping forward, her voice sharp. I will not let that happen. The figure's glow pulsed. Then you must prepare. The hunt has begun. Jack's stomach dropped. Hunt. Erin's gaze darkened. They won't stop until they take me back. She turned to Jack, her expression grim. And now, they know about you too. Jack exhaled slowly. Fantastic. He had no idea what he had just stepped into. But one thing was clear. Running was no longer an option. A cold wind swept through the valley, carrying with it a deep hum that resonated in Jack's bones. He wasn't sure if it was the presence of the glowing figures or something else entirely, but the air felt charged, like a storm waiting to break. Erin stood tall in front of her people, but Jack could see the tension in her posture. These weren't just long-lost allies. There was hesitation in the way they looked at her, a silent weight that pressed against the moment. The tallest figure, the one who had spoken before, stepped forward again. His light pulsed, and though his face had no true features, Jack could feel the intensity of his gaze. You are marked. Erin stiffened. I know. Jack felt his heartbeat quicken. Okay, not to interrupt, but what does that mean? The being turned its glowing eyes to him. It means the collectors will not stop until they have her. And now, you as well. Jack exhaled slowly. Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. Erin took a step forward. I called for your help. The figure's glow dimmed slightly. We cannot interfere. Silence fell over the valley. Jack saw something flicker in Erin's expression. Anger, disbelief. You would abandon me. Her voice was tight, sharp with something Jack couldn't quite name. The figure hesitated. We are bound by the old laws. Erin's fists clenched. Laws. She repeated, her voice laced with something bitter. The collectors do not follow your laws. They take. They destroy. The figure's glow pulsed. It is the way of the universe. Jack let out a disbelieving laugh. That's it? That's your answer? Some cosmic, that's just how things are excuse. He shook his head. No offense, but that's garbage. A strange silence followed. The other glowing beings shifted slightly, as if murmuring among themselves without speaking. Erin turned to Jack. They are afraid. Jack frowned. Afraid? They don't look afraid. They are. Her voice was steady, but Jack could see the tightness in her jaw. The collectors do not just take prisoners. They take knowledge, power. The moment they interfere, they risk becoming the next targets. Jack let out a slow breath. So, what? We're on our own. The tallest figure stepped forward again, its glow flickering. We will not fight for you. Erin's shoulders dropped slightly, but she said nothing. Then the figure added, but we will not stop you. Erin's gaze snapped up. Jack could practically feel the air shift around them. The other figures stepped back, and in the center of the valley, the ground changed. The glowing earth beneath them rippled like water, and from the shifting light, something rose. Jack's breath caught. A ship. It wasn't like anything he had ever seen before. The surface pulsed with a strange blue energy, shifting like liquid metal, yet perfectly structured. The design was sleek, almost organic, as if it had been grown rather than built. Symbols flickered along its hull, glowing with the same strange energy as the beings around them. Erin's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time since he had met her, Jack saw something new in her expression. Hope. She stepped forward slowly, reaching out a hand toward the ship. The surface shimmered in response, recognizing her. Jack looked at the glowing figures. You said you wouldn't fight for us, but you're giving us this. The figure didn't respond directly. Instead, it simply said, go, before it is too late. Erin turned to Jack. We need to move. Now. Jack didn't argue. They rushed toward the ship, And as soon as they reached it, a smooth section of the hull melted away, forming an entrance. Aaron stepped inside without hesitation, and Jack followed. The moment he crossed the threshold, the entire interior came to life. Soft blue lights flickered on, illuminating a space that felt impossibly large compared to the outside. Strange, shifting symbols danced across the walls, pulsing like a heartbeat. Erin moved with purpose, running her hands over the control panel. The symbols rearranged themselves at her touch, responding as if they knew her. Jack hesitated near the entrance. "Are you sure you can fly this thing?" Erin gave him a sharp look. "I built it." Jack blinked. "Oh." He barely had time to process that before the ship trembled beneath them. The hum of power vibrated through the floor, and outside, the glowing figures took several steps back. Then, a sound split the air. A low, inhuman howl. Jack's stomach dropped. He turned toward the valley entrance just in time to see the shadows move. The collectors had arrived. They didn't walk. They slithered. Their forms were shifting, liquid dark things that bent the light around them, making the world warp in their presence. One of them lifted its head, or what Jack thought was its head. Twin slits of red light burned where eyes should have been. Then it lunged. Jack barely had time to react before the ship blasted upward. The force of the acceleration slammed him against the seat as Erin took the controls. The valley vanished below them, and the sky above shattered. For a brief, terrible second, Jack saw something through the break in the clouds, something massive, something waiting. Then the ship pushed through, and the universe bent around them. The ship hurtled through the void, stars stretching into long, thin lines as they entered hyperspace. The hum of the vessel's core pulsed beneath Jack's feet, steady and alive. He exhaled, still gripping the edge of his seat, as if the force of their escape could somehow pull him backward in time. Erin was at the controls, her hands moving with practiced ease. The blue symbols flickered under her touch, shifting, responding to her commands like a living thing. Jack swallowed hard. That was close. Erin didn't look at him. "It's not over." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "We left them behind." Erin's fingers tightened around the panel. "They don't need to follow. They can be waiting." A chill ran through Jack's spine. "You're saying they can predict where we're going?" Erin's lips pressed into a thin line. "They don't predict. They pull. If we are not careful, they will drag us straight into their trap." Jack ran a hand through his hair, forcing himself to breathe. "So what do we do?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second, and that was enough for Jack to notice. "You don't know," he said. It wasn't a question. Erin finally turned to him, her silver eyes unreadable. "There is one place we can go, but it is dangerous." Jack let out a dry laugh. "Dangerous? Compared to what we just ran from?" Erin's gaze darkened. "Compared to them, it is worse." That shut Jack up. She turned back to the controls, and the ship tilted. The streaking stars outside the window blurred, and suddenly, space broke. The ship dropped out of hyperspace with a jolt, and before them, something loomed. Jack's breath caught. "That's not a planet." Erin nodded. "No." Before them was a colossal structure. A floating, twisting mass of metal and stone, ancient and broken in places, yet still alive. Giant spires stretched outward, tangled like the ribs of some forgotten titan. Faint lights flickered deep within the cracks, as if the place itself still breathed. "What is this?" Jack asked, barely above a whisper. Erin's voice was steady. "A graveyard." Jack turned to her. "Hose." She didn't answer. The ship drifted closer, and as they neared, Jack could make out the remnants of battles. Giant hulls of ships, shattered and embedded into the floating ruin. Some bore strange markings, others were stripped of insignias, as if time itself had erased their identities. Then he saw them. Figures barely visible in the darkness. Floating. Watching. Jack felt his chest tighten. "I don't think we're alone." Erin didn't flinch. "We never are." The ship slipped into a narrow passage between the wreckage. Shadows stretched and shifted, moving unnaturally as if they had a will of their own. Jack's pulse pounded in his ears. Are they alive? Aaron hesitated. Not in the way you think. Jack didn't like that answer. A sudden clang echoed through the ship, making them both jump. Jack spun around. What was that? Aaron's fingers flew over the controls. Something latched on. Jack grabbed the nearest rail. Latched on? What do you mean latched on? Like. The ship lurched. Jack barely kept his footing as the vessel was dragged downward. The view outside spun, metal and debris rushing past, as the ship was pulled deeper into the heart of the graveyard. The controls flickered, the lights inside the cockpit dimming. Aaron's jaw clenched. Hold on. Jack gritted his teeth. To what? Then, with a sudden snap, the ship stopped. A deadly silence filled the air. Jack exhaled shakily. That wasn't fun. Aaron ignored him. She reached for a lever on the control panel and pulled. The screens flickered, scanning the area around them. Something moved. Jack saw it in the distance, something shifting in the shadows. A figure, tall and wrong. Its body was long, its limbs stretched as if gravity itself had been forgotten. The light around it twisted, bending unnaturally. Jack felt his stomach drop. That's not one of the collectors. Aaron's voice was quiet. No. Jack turned to her. Then what is it? Aaron met his gaze. A warning. A chill settled over him. A warning for what? She turned back to the screen. For what comes next. The ship's hull groaned as the strange force held it in place. Jack gripped the edge of his seat, his heart hammering in his chest. The thing outside, tall, twisted, and shifting, stood motionless, yet Jack could feel its presence inside his bones. The way the light warped around it made his vision blur, as if it was something that shouldn't exist. What do we do? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Aaron's hands moved swiftly over the controls, her silver eyes scanning every flickering symbol on the console. We wait. Jack's breath caught. Wait? For what? Aaron's jaw tightened. To see if we are worthy. A cold shiver ran down his spine. Worthy of what? Aaron hesitated, just for a second, but Jack saw the uncertainty in her eyes. Then the ship lurched. The force holding them in place released without warning, sending the vessel spiraling downward. The stars outside vanished, swallowed by a thick, inky blackness that seemed to breathe. Jack barely had time to brace himself before the ship hit something solid. A shockwave of silence followed. Jack coughed, pushing himself upright. The cockpit was dark, only the faint glow of emergency lights casting eerie shadows. Aaron. A flicker of movement beside him, then her voice. I'm here. Jack exhaled. What just happened? Aaron's fingers danced over the controls, but they remained unresponsive. We were pulled inside. Jack's stomach twisted. Inside what? A soft mechanical hiss echoed through the ship. The air felt heavy, thick with something unseen. Jack turned toward the viewport. His breath caught in his throat. They were no longer in space. No stars. No wreckage. No movement outside. Just a vast, endless void. A place that wasn't space, but wasn't solid either. It stretched infinitely, shifting like a living shadow. And then something moved. A shape, a presence. No form, no body, just a feeling. A deep pressure settled over Jack's chest, and in that moment, he knew they were not alone. Aaron stood, her posture rigid. It's here. Jack swallowed. What's here? She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. The one who sent the warning. Jack clenched his fists. Okay, and who is that exactly? Aaron exhaled slowly. The architect. Jack blinked. The what now? Before she could answer, the ship's lights flickered violently. And then, a voice. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't something Jack heard. It was something he felt. "You are late." Jack's mind reeled. The words weren't spoken. They were just there, pressed into his thoughts, heavy and absolute. Erin bowed her head. "We had no choice." The collectors. Irrelevant. Jack shivered. Whoever, whatever, this was, it wasn't human. The shadows outside shifted, twisting, reaching toward the ship. Not attacking. Not threatening. Just testing. Jack forced himself to speak. "What do you want from us?" Silence. Then, "Not from you." Jack's stomach dropped. He turned to Erin. She stepped forward, unafraid. "I know why you called me." Jack stared at her. "Wait, you know this thing?" Erin didn't answer. The ship trembled as the shadows outside opened. A doorway. A path leading into the unknown. Jack felt a deep primal part of him scream not to go. But Erin took a step forward. She turned back to him, her gaze steady. "You don't have to follow." Jack clenched his jaw. "Like hell I don't." She gave him a small, knowing smile. Then, together, they stepped into the dark.